17 years under the ownership of Roman Abramovich, Chelsea won every single trophy it was eligible to compete for, equating to a total of 21 trophies. But after they finally got their hands on the final one to complete their collection, a certain war in Ukraine, and then...
Okay, the breaking news is...
Breaking news from Chelsea as regards...
Roman Abramovich.
Roman Abramovich.
Roman Abramovich.
Roman Abramovich has now been disqualified as the director of the football club.
It has been confirmed that...
We know there's been a lot of interest. We've reported bids have been made.
The four contenders vying to buy the club.
So Antonio Rudiger looks likely to leave Chelsea at the end of...
They lost everything. Man who poured over £1 billion into the club is out. His personally appointed hierarchy are likely going out. A lot of the players' futures uncertain, managers' future uncertain, staff's future uncertain. And then you have the fans, the supporters, the people who make up, the people who are the club, despite not having any involvement in all of this mess, will unfortunately probably have to suffer from it the most. And if there's anything that the likes of Manchester United and Arsenal have taught us, is that it honestly could get seriously worse, way worse beyond our wildest imagination. But despite that, you don't have to look far to see Liverpool as a source of hope that with proper planning and patience, everything will be alright. The Roman Empire has fallen with power way beyond our control and imagination set to take over, and this is why Chelsea will never ever remain the same. The club may or may not fall into a ditch. Welcome Chelsea to life after Roman Abramovich. It is no secret that Chelsea are currently not in a good place. The recent geopolitical issues going on in the world has led to the sanctioning of the club's owner, with everything eventually pointing to the sale of the club. There is tension in the air, not only for the fans but for the people who work at the club, right from the club's hierarchy to the manager to the staffs and then to the players. There's just this crippling fear of uncertainty at the club, which is already even reflecting on their recent on-field performances. As a Chelsea fan, you're probably scared. You don't want to go back to being a mid-table team with Champions League glory a distant memory. No, you're trying so hard to convince yourself that everything will be alright, and yeah, maybe it will or maybe it wouldn't. You're hoping it's not the latter, right? The key word here is uncertainty. You don't know where your club will be in the next 5 years, and many have pointed to this exact moment in time as quite possibly the death of Chelsea, or that Chelsea will never be where it used to be, or that Chelsea may never win the Champions League in maybe like 50 years or so, or that the club may never ever be the same again. Or perhaps you're looking at Arsenal and going, I don't want my club to turn out to be like this. You're only focusing on the negatives. Ignore everything the media has been saying. Heck, ignore how I even started this video. When you start to look at the positives, it's not as bad as it all seems, at least not yet anyways, because it could get much worse. But at the end of every dark tunnel, there is light. And while there is a genuine fear of possibly turning out to be like Arsenal, there is hope that if things turn out right or could somehow go according to plan, you could turn out to be like Liverpool. But yeah, there is a but. There is a much bigger threat, which in essence did start from Chelsea way back in 2003, that kind of will make it look like Chelsea isn't progressing, even if they are, and if not managed properly, it could get really messy for everyone involved, but that's for later in the video. So now, let's talk about the most important thing that Chelsea has to do right. This could literally define the club's entire future going forward. It's already something that's currently in progress, and I must warn you that if this somehow manages to go wrong, even at the slightest, you cannot imagine the detrimental long-term effect that this would have on the club, and that is... The process for the change of ownership at Chelsea is currently ongoing. The fans and everyone associated with Chelsea are following and watching closely to know who it's going to be. Perhaps this is the single most important thing over the next few decades that has to be gotten right. Of course, Chelsea may never get another owner like Roman Abramovich, but the next owner has to be at least decent in some way and must be able to connect with both the club and its fans in such a way that it will be beneficial for both. But unfortunately, that usually isn't the case, as many of the current football owners don't view their club's fans, but as nothing more than customers. The new owner who is coming in, I don't care how much time and effort he puts into getting his PR team to compose a heartwarmingly appeasing post on social media or a pre-planned speech on how he or she plans to quote-unquote make Chelsea great, even greater than it was before, and that they would want the full support of the fans, take the club to greater heights, and will never join the Super League. The truth of the matter is that the first thing that would always come to their minds is making profits. To be fair, this isn't entirely bad from a business point of view to a certain extent. After all, they're paying billions of pounds to acquire the club, so they must be able to be making money and profits from it. But from the sporting side of things, if the club is being negatively affected all for the sake of the owner's profits, there will be trouble. And this has been the reason why you see that at so many clubs nowadays, the fans and the owners continue to clash in order to protect each other's interests. This is just a perfect illustration of the current evolution of football. Abramovich was everything for Chelsea. He didn't care too much about making profits and was even pouring his own personal fortunes into the club. He made sure Chelsea were able to compete without too much financial hurdle, and that would be incredibly tough for anyone else to match. Chelsea will never remain the same doesn't mean the club will not be able to maintain their position. It just means that they now have to do it in a very different way. Although Abramovich was initially known as someone who always threw money at all of his problems, you could start to see from 2019, during the time when they were hit with a transfer ban, where club legend Frank Lampard was their manager, they have been showing us that saving a bit of money can become an option with the extremely talented players they have fielded out from their academy recently, and this could be the step moving forward. They are in an incredibly unique position that not even Arsenal found themselves in all those years ago. Abramovich has pretty much set Chelsea up to succeed, and it's up to the new owners to take this opportunity. I read somewhere that he wants to write off the £1.5 billion debt at the club, and that has its own complications, as it may apparently be breaking a rule of some sort. But if he successfully does that, he is not only leaving the potential owners with one of the biggest clubs in Europe, but without any form of debt too. Not to mention an incredibly gifted squad filled with a lot of young talented players and an ever-producing academy for the future generation of players. There is literally no excuse in the world to screw this up, which brings me to we can't help but to talk about the negatives and how things could potentially go wrong. The first thing that could go wrong is getting the type of owner that either won't be popular amongst the fans, or an owner that will put their personal interest at the expense of the club, or an owner whose daughter will remind you that the club belongs to them and not the fans, or the one that is just borderline controversial. This is a unique recipe for disaster which could drastically change the club's fortunes for years to come. But what about an owner who is in the process of trying to do the right thing for himself at the club, but ends up messing everything up in the process? We all know that for a club as big as Chelsea, the Stamford Bridge is small, and this could potentially be the first problem that the new owners will want to solve. They will most likely want to build a new world-class modern stadium in order to be able to generate more money, but this of course is truly a bad omen. You don't have to look far in London to find two clubs whose entire conditions changed for the worse as soon as they made the move to new and bigger stadiums. Arsenal has never been the same since they moved to the Emirates from Highbury in 2006, and more recently Tottenham, who moved from White Hart Lane to the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. These two teams, ever since they both got to their respective Champions League finals around the time this was happening and sacked the managers who took them there, have never remained the same. Coincidentally, they both moved to their respective stadiums the year they last got to the Champions League final. Wow. If you find this fascinating, please smash like it. You could kind of start to understand why the potential Chelsea owners may want this, because according to Deloitte, the matchday revenue for 2021 for a club like Manchester United with a capacity of 74,000 at Old Trafford generated £86.7 million, and Liverpool, who have a similar capacity with Stamford Bridge capacity of 42,000, was able to generate £72.5 million, compared to Chelsea, who are only able to generate £54.5 million in matchday revenue. And when you take into account that Tottenham, who recently moved into their new gigantic stadium, have reportedly increased their matchday revenue to about 24% and earned £94.5 million from matchday revenues, this could possibly be the new direction that the club will want to take. But at what expense? Well, they may not be able to challenge other clubs on a financial level, but if done well, just like Tottenham before they ruined everything eventually, get a manager who can build a team with almost nothing and still maintain the on-pitch performances. But if they don't move to a new stadium, and the club wants to start making a lot of money, they will have to increase the price of everything, right from ticket sales down to merchandise, which, by the way, will anger a good chunk of the fan base. And it gets even darker when you consider top clubs that didn't do too well after getting new ownership compared to those who are currently killing it right now. You'll notice that Liverpool, who is currently the only top 6 club with the unique exception of both Manchester clubs, is the only one out of all of them not to move to a new stadium, but coincidentally is currently the most successful one. They are proof that you don't need a lot of money to be able to compete with the likes of Manchester City, but the true sustainability of that will come into question once Jurgen Klopp leaves the club. Like what I said earlier, Chelsea are in a unique position. They have a pool of young talents both from their first and academy team, and inside the first team there is about 2 or 3 or even more world-class players who could worth over £100 million in transfer fees if sold in the next couple of years. Just to be clear, I am by no means suggesting Chelsea should become a selling club, but if they should follow through with building a stadium, which would surely involve them taking out a loan, selling big players could be the fastest way for them to be able to recover the money and pay off that loan as quickly as they can without it affecting the club's trajectory in the long run. Arsenal were not in this type of position back then because at the time the club was building the stadium and were done with it, a lot of the big players in the team were aging and the transfer fees in football was not yet as crazy as it is today. Look at this. Arsenal's best player at the time, Thierry Henry, was sold to Barcelona for just €24 million, 21.1 million in pounds. Now imagine with the way football currently is, where a club was successfully able to trick Manchester United into paying £80 million for Harry Maguire. Who is to say that they cannot get over £100 million on someone like Reece James, who is literally on course to becoming one of the best defenders of his generation? And let's not forget the fact that Arsenal over the years have only had few world-class players which, due to their respective ages, had very low sell-on fee. But with Chelsea, this is different. They may never be able to recover even half of what they paid for Lukaku if sold because of his age, low sell-on fee, and most importantly his performance right now, but they do have a lot of young world-class players, even Ballon d'Or level players such as Kai Havertz, Mason Mount, Ben Chilwell, and Reece James, not to mention that they still have a buyback clause for Tammy Abraham which they could potentially activate at any given time for a reasonably low price. But if they are ever going to sell these players, who are they going to sell them to? Look, Chelsea don't really need to sell their best players, but as it happened with Eden Hazard in 2019, they showed that they can sell a player in order to make the team better. Now, here is where it gets tricky though. Chelsea is a big club, make no mistake about it, so if a player would want to leave, they would only want to leave for a bigger club where they would at least have a more guaranteed path to winning the Champions League or Ballon d'Or. But clubs like Barcelona and Real Madrid no longer have interest in spending big anymore, I assume. For Real Madrid, they changed their Galactico policy a long time ago and are now focusing on bringing much younger players, but if Chelsea can get hold of a player who could later keep Florentino Perez awake at night until he signs him just like Mbappe, then good. And with Barcelona, well, I think they must have learned their lesson about overpaying for players. Which now brings us to only 3 possible teams right now: Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, and Newcastle United. These are the only clubs in Europe that have the capacity to constantly sign players for over €100 million, and surprise surprise, 2 of those are from the Premier League. I must say that this could have extreme consequences though. If Chelsea were to start selling their best players to their Premier League rivals, they would risk becoming just like Arsenal. That's why a player like Harry Kane currently struggles to attract interest from many clubs, which leaves Manchester City as his only option for both himself and his club's benefits. Even if Tottenham don't want to sell Kane to a Premier League rival, they literally have no choice because the player wants to leave. Bayern Munich won't sign those type of players, and Manchester United as of right now is no longer becoming as attractive as it once was, but maybe later in the future though. So this could actually make Manchester City Remember what I said about the only teams who can sign players above the 100 million euros mark consistently? Yeah, two of them are from the Premier League. Liverpool and Manchester City are the current standard bearers for the Premier League, and with Liverpool, their problems would only start if they somehow fail to properly replace Jurgen Klopp at the club. And if that happens, Manchester City will surely start to dominate the Premier League, because in terms of financial power, Liverpool's model will soon also become Chelsea's model, and this will not allow them to challenge City financially. What's even crazy is that Manchester City no longer operates at a loss anymore, as their recent financial records have shown that they're now starting to make profits. This is by no means still an equal or fair fight, because despite that, Manchester City still have an endless amount of cash, a cheat code if you wish to call it that. But there is good news though. Anyone who knows Guardiola will know that if the Premier League starts to become too easy, he may decide to leave in search of a new challenge, especially if he has already won the Champions League for Manchester City. So, it may take a while for City to recover, and as for Manchester United, they need to first overcome the club's internal issues before they even think of dominating the Premier League. But what if by the time Guardiola leaves Manchester City, Newcastle United are ready to take over? This is crazy. They are much wealthier, have a more active fan base, and have the overall potential to possibly become even stronger than Manchester City. This could be dangerous for Chelsea, who may be progressing at the time but not as well or fast or good enough to match their rivals. And if they don't have the sense of awareness to grasp this by the time, the fans may possibly end up doing something that could cause a seismic shift in how the club will move forward, similar to what Arsenal fans did years ago. Chelsea are probably in the best position possible for such a drastic change of power at the club. They have the past mistakes of Arsenal, Tottenham and Manchester United to learn from, plus the already smooth slate Abramovich has already laid for them. Thomas Tuchel, man, they have to keep this man, no matter what, or at least bring in a manager who could turn good players into world class if he leaves, and if he stays, you have to prioritize his authority over that of the players, or you'll be risking having the Tuchel of Borussia Dortmund and Paris Saint-Germain. Come on, don't be like Manchester United. And that is another video. This is just my take on the current Chelsea situation. I hope everything works out for the club. Thank you all for watching this video. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Also share it, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a nice day, and remember, love the game.